Okay, so we're going to begin with the preparation for the state examination. We're going to begin with this lecture, which is lecture number 2. And we're going to be talking about some ways. I'm going to give you during this lecture some ideas to how you're going to be graded when you take your state examination. And of course, we're going to continue with practices and monitoring you and so on and so forth. I see that there are only 3 people who actually access the Zoom. I just want to remind you that it's very important that that you click on computer audio once you access Zoom. So in fact, I'm going to actually check to make sure that those that are already in the Zoom meeting have already been access it correctly. So I just want to make sure that that's actually the case. So I'm going to be asking you, can you hear me, and so on and so forth. So please give me about 20-30 seconds to get this done. Okay, let's see. Okay. Okay. Okay, let me see that. Can you hear me, Annelise?
Yes, but I'm actually
Oh, okay, let me just take note of that because that's going to be complicated. Okay, perfect, but you're fine, so thank you. Okay. Okay, I can hear you. Good, thank you. Have a good lunch. Marta, can you hear me? Marta Flor? Marta, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. So I'll put you back in the waiting room. Thank you. Oops. Sorry. Moni. Monica, can you hear me? Yes, you can hear me, right? Okay, thank you. Sarahi, can you hear me? Perfect, thank you. Put you back in the waiting room. And I think we have Andrea too here coming in, and Anna. Okay, let's see Andrea now. Hi, Andrea, can you hear me? Can you hear me? Okay, I have you. So thank you. I put you back in the waiting room. And then we have Anna Carlin. Anna, can you hear me? Yeah, you can hear me, right, Anna? Yeah, Anna, can you hear me? Okay, thank you. I'll put you back in the waiting room. Thank you. This is great. Everybody is, and I think I have Ana Rodriguez. Let's see, I don't think I checked her. Ana, can you hear me? Ana Rodriguez, can you hear me? I think you are muted, Ana. Either that or... Oh, I can hear you now. Thank you. I'll put you back in the waiting room. Okay, so this is great news. I can't believe everybody accessed correctly. First class, first time. Yeah, if your computer keeps freezing, this is the question from Nidia. That's actually an issue because you have it's most likely an internet issue. We had that with a student, and the internet, for some reason, there was no good internet speed, and that created a little bit of a problem. So it's okay if you cannot access, that's fine. What we're going to do today is, of course, heavy monitoring again. Just want to detect any issues with simultaneous, give you some feedback. I'm going to assign maybe some remedial seminars today. So it's going to be pretty good. I have to tell you now that on February 5th, we're not going to have class. So that way, we're going to have a class next week, the 29th. Then we're going to skip the 5th. I mean, that's how things stand as it is right now, maybe change. So I will announce next week a definite, but it looks like we're not going to have class. In which case I will give you some assignment to do at home, particularly things that have to do with feedback and all that stuff. Of course, we're going to make it up. I'm kind of looking into whether we should have some sort of a midterm there because I have to give you a written midterm. So maybe I give you the written midterm on the 5th, and then we do have class. And we complete that, and therefore the only thing that we're going to have pending here will be the final examination at the end of the course. So I'm still debating, but I'll announce that next week, okay? But I'll let you know. But next week we do have class, okay? So show up next week. All right, so having said that, one of the things that we want to look at is how you're going to be graded when you take the exam, and that's important because you can't really play a game if you don't know the rules of the game. And for me, not knowing how you're going to be graded is critical. It really is, because if you don't know how you're going to be graded, then it's very difficult to maximize the number of points that you're going to get in the exam. So we're going to look at the way the examiners will grade you in your simultaneous component. So we're going to look at that and see how we can maximize the points that are available there. And you should, the way you should look at this is, it's pretty simple. The way you should look at it is as follows. I'm actually going to, it's like, I don't know if you ever played Pac-Man. That's a very old game, by the way. But the whole purpose of the game is to eat as many dots as possible. Same thing here. Instead of eating dots during the game or during the exam, you want to score points. So when you look at the simultaneous is at about 125 words per minute, 130 words per minute, and it lasts approximately 7 minutes. So by doing the math, it's 130 words per minute times 7 minutes. You're talking about 910 words total in your simultaneous. So you are going to be interpreting 910 words. So those words are distributed in sentences. So here's one sentence, then it's another one, another one, another one, another one. Maybe this one is 2-3 lines long, and so on and so forth. Whatever it is. Okay, so that's what it is. Oh, sorry, I got to show you that. So you have 910 words, and these lines are just sentences, okay? Now, obviously, they're not going to be grading your 910 words because we know for a fact that they're going to be looking at only 50 scoring units. And what a scoring unit is something I'm going to define in a second. But a scoring unit is either a single word or a combination of words, or it could be as long as maybe 4 or 5 words together. But in general, the scoring unit is 1 word, 2 words, 3 words. So you can easily see here that 50 times, in the worst case scenario, is 3 words per scoring units, which is not going to be, but let's say it's the worst case scenario. 50 times 3 is 150 words. But so this, you can think of it, they're going to select the 150 words. But there are 910 there. Well, they select 150 out of those 910, and you're graded only on 150, which means that there is going to be a total of 760 words that play no role in your grading. 760 words, for Christ's sake. You realize that that's about 84% of the exam. So what this means to all of you is that when you miss a term in your simultaneous, the key is for you to interpret as fast as you can and to continue interpreting. Because if you miss a term, maybe that term that you missed is not considered a scoring unit, so it counts as nothing, so you don't get any deduction. You don't miss anything. But because you get so obsessed about trying to deliver that term, you may be missing the next 5 or 6 where there is a scoring unit, which you incidentally know how to interpret that, but yet you just basically don't interpret because you didn't hear it. You were concentrated on the word that you didn't know. And therefore you lose a point. See? So the key in this particular exam, it's always the key in all interpreting exams, is to skip the term you don't know. Don't get too crazy about what is the meaning of it, because it may not play any role. There is an 85% chance that it plays no role whatsoever in your grading. So skip it and keep going, but keep going as soon as possible. That's what we call recovery time. So when you don't know a term, the ideal scenario is that you continue interpreting with the next term. That's the ideal scenario. If you don't know a term and then it takes you 4 or 5 terms to re-engage, to continue interpreting, then that's not an ideal scenario, because there is a higher probability of finding a scoring units in a set of 6, 7 terms than in one term. So the strategy for this exam is to never stop, to always continue interpreting, because that's the way you can, if you looking at the game Pac-Man, I don't know if you know it or not, you might be too young for this, but if you look at Pac-Man, I've seen it that they are playing it again. So if you look at Pac-Man, it's the idea of scoring or eating as many dots as possible until you're killed, right? So the same thing happens here. If you're like in Pac-Man, you're eating, and then if you stop because of whatever reason, they're gonna kill you. Same thing here. So the key, that's why I always told you from the very beginning, and I insist even now, if you don't know a term, skip the term and keep going. It's in your best interest. You may say, well, but it doesn't sound right. Who cares? Because the way they grade you is not on how you sound, it's on how many of those scoring units you hit correctly. So when you do the practices here, you do the practices in the lab, you do the practices anywhere, this idea has to be really embedded in you, so that if you don't know a term, you don't dwell on it. You just skip it and keep going, and that's really critical. That's critical, okay? If you stop and you think and you miss the next 10 terms for each term that you don't know, you will fail your exam. So don't look at this, and by the way, the other important thing, when you don't know a term, don't start thinking, oh my God, I don't know a term, I probably didn't pass this exam. It has nothing to do with it, because the probability is, you have 85% probability that that term is not part of your scoring unit. And if it is, who cares? Because the way it works, to pass this, you have to get 35 out of 50. So your passing score is 35 out of 50. Which means that you can miss 15 scoring units. So when you look at this, 35 scoring units is about 101 and 105 words. 105 words in a total of 910, it's about, what, 10, 12%, about 11.5%. So technically, to pass this exam, you have to know 11.5% of all the words that you hear, meaning that you could technically deliver one word and miss 8 and still pass the exam. The problem is, if you miss this, when you miss these 8 words, it includes all this. We don't know where the scoring units are. So there is that kind of problem. But your mind should be you should take the strategy of not paying attention to not knowing the term, skipping the term, re-engaging right away, and don't let that bother you throughout the exam, because it probably had no impact on your performance. It most likely had zero impact. Now, you could make a big deal out of it and then thus fail your exam because you made it. You gave more importance to that omission than what it actually is. It's not important because it may not be scoring units. Now, how do they determine where the scoring units go? Well, the scoring units are actually assigned, like maybe right here is one, right here there is another one, right here is another one, right here is another one, another one, another one, another one. Okay, so those are the scoring units. Now, there is a rule that if it is properly respected in the design of this exam, that says that you cannot have two scoring units, two scoring units have to be separated by at least 10 words. So that's important, right? 10 words. So that means that if you get stuck with one term, you may say, well, I have now 10 words. And not really. If you get stuck with one term, maybe it's the term that is before the scoring unit that comes next. So you can never get stuck with the term. You always skip the term and keep going. The name of the game to pass this exam is to show flow, non-stop, continuous interpreting in the simultaneous. That's the name of the game. You do that, you are probably, and of course you have to know your terminology and you have to have the speed and all that. But if you do that, you pretty much have a chance of passing that exceeds 90%. But if your brain plays tricks on you and you just get too worried because you didn't know this word or because you hesitated here, and you're trying, some students, when they take the candidates, when they take the test, they are taking the test and they're assessing themselves as they're taking the test. That's the worst thing you can do. You cannot assess yourself because you don't even know what you're being assessed on. How do you know how could you assess yourself if you don't know where these scoring units are located? So missing a word doesn't mean you missed a point. How do you know that? Because maybe you miss a word that is right here, and that has zero deduction. Now, if you hit one right here, yeah, that would be a problem. So the ideal scenario is for you not to let your mind play tricks on you. And you start training yourself the practices we do here in class while I monitor you. So I'm going to be monitoring you today. Everybody will be monitored unless there's a technical issue somewhere. So when I monitor you today, the key is that you behave the same way you're going to behave when you take the exam. You don't know a term, you skip it and keep going, because that's what I'm going to be looking for. That's my feedback today on that particular approach. Of course, there will be additional feedback on vocabulary and all that stuff, but that's the main feedback that I will give you today, because we need to correct this as soon as possible, right? I don't want you to be playing a game using different rules. And that's what you're doing when you're obsessed about a term that you don't know. You're playing a game which doesn't require you to be obsessed about every single word you hear, but you're playing with different rules. Obviously, you're not gonna score. I mean, it's like playing soccer with rules that have to do with basketball. So the rules are very simple, okay? And I know it's difficult to understand this because we think that to pass this exam, you have to be perfect. And there's nothing further from the truth. I mean, that's crazy. You don't have to be perfect. But you got to score 35 out of 50 scoring units. That's the only thing you got to do. You may say, but how am I going to pass if I just, if I don't have a good style? All they do is they use the objective approach. The objective approach is how many scoring units you got right. Now, when you barely make it like 70%, that's 35 out of 50, there are other factors that may come into play, and then you may end up getting a deduction of 1 point, and you end up not passing because you were too, I guess the delivery was too broken or whatever the case is. So my goal or your goal should always be to score about 38 out of 50 to pass this exam. Because once you are above 71%, then any style issue or any other thing will have no impact whatsoever on the grading. When you're really close to 70, that's when it will have an impact. And by that I mean 69, 70, or 71. If it's 69, you may end up passing because you're really close, but you have good style and all that, they pass you. You get 71, you may end up failing because although you deliver 71% of the scoring units, but your style is kind of sloppy and is broken. So the style and the flow and the uniformity in the flow and all, and the tone of voice, that's what I call an insurance policy in case you fall into that range, in case you have an accident there. But if you're planning to score 72, 73, 74% or better, it makes no difference. They're not going to execute that policy. Questions. Is it safe to say that the scoring units are the vocabulary words you gave us in this course? No. No, we don't know what the scoring units are. But I can tell you, I can give you hints. Scoring units will always be legal terms. So if you hear legal term, that's a scoring unit. That's for sure. Scoring unit will always be factual information, an address, a name, a case number, a license plate, a description. That will be a scoring unit. Scoring unit will always be an idiomatic expression. It's raining cats and dogs. For sure. And those I can guarantee. Whatever is after that, whatever they want to assign as scoring units besides these 3 elements, it's up to them because they change it from one exam to the next. You have to understand, they always give the same version of the exam, but they always have changed the scoring units. It's much easier, right, and cheaper. So as a rule, legal terms, factual information, and idiomatic expressions are always scoring units. The rest could be words that and typically they do this, words that you comprehend in English, but you don't have the exact translation. I always give the same example. Overwhelming, abrumador, you don't have it. So if they say, for example, this has been such an overwhelming day, instead of saying, este fue un día tan abrumador, because you don't remember abrumador, if you can explain, you can certainly do it. You can say, este ha sido un día tan difícil, okay? Este ha sido un día tan ocupado. That will be a partial credit on that scoring unit. Mm-hmm. So we don't know the other one, but now those 3 will be at least 70% of your exam. So, if you know the legal term, that's why I emphasize know the legal terms, please. You need to know them. Factual information is very important, and those are easy to deliver, except that you have to be able to be very close to it. You remember in arraignment that when the case number was set, if you were too far behind it, you couldn't say the numbers. So you got to have speed to always be close to the original. And in terms of idiomatic expressions, those are actually, sometimes you cannot have the exact equivalent term, but you can explain them if you comprehend them. It is very easy, but you have to control here, okay? It's very important, your mind, when you take this exam. Would our volume tone be evaluated? Not necessarily, unless you're in the 70% range. However, they have to be able to hear you, because if they don't hear you, they consider everything you said as nothing. They have to be able to hear you. But you shouldn't be screaming, because they're going to think, wait a minute, in a court of law, this interferes with the actual proceeding. Now, I had some students, like I was monitoring one today in the previous class, and whenever he didn't know a term, he lowered his tone of voice. And that's a red flag. So that's basically telling the examiners, please fail me. In reality, in the real exam, maybe he didn't know terms that were not scoring units that had no impact, but it has an impact on the style, because it's just basically lowering your tone of voice. So you have to have a consistent tone of voice. It's not too loud and not too soft. the three elements, no, not three elements, the three type of scoring units are legal terms, factual information, addresses, names, license plates, descriptions, and idiomatic expressions. Okay, all right. Okay, so now we're going to start doing practices, all simultaneous. You're going to go into this frame of mind, what I just mentioned, because if I were to give you a grade, I will grade you only on this. Only on whether or not you are able to follow my advice, to do the strategy for this exam, the proper strategy. Forget about being perfect. Forget about, if you're a perfectionist, please. No, if you're obsessive about terms, forget it. Just deliver as much as possible. Just deliver as many terms as possible. Skip the terms you don't know. Keep going, keep going, keep going, like the ever-ready bunny, Never stop when it comes to simultaneous. You do that, you will most likely pass it, unless you don't know your legal terms. Now you have to have the speed, because you see what happens when you don't have the speed. It slows you down. If it slows you down, you miss terms. And if you miss terms, then suddenly it happens in a very distinct pattern. You say, poo, 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 and then you don't know, so you don't know 4 or 5 words, and then two, and then you don't know, two. So that's going to create you problems, because most likely the things that actually are affecting your delivery are going to be scoring units, most likely. Legal terms, factual information. We know that numbers are a problem, right? We experience that in the simultaneous. How do you overcome that? You just have to be very close to the original, which means you can't be too far behind the original. Not more than a couple of words, or maybe even closer to that. Because if you hear a number, and when you hear the number, you're interpreting 3 words before, then you're going to miss the number, period. There's nothing you can do. Now, if you do miss a number that you know is going to be factual information, or a license plate or something to that effect, don't worry, okay, it's 1. I still have 15 more to go. I can miss still 15 more, and they're not going to be 15 more factual informations, that's for sure. Sometimes I ask, what about if the same word is used twice, and you miss it twice? Do they get double deduction? Yeah, if both words are, if in both instances that word is considered a scoring unit, you will. Each scoring unit is about a point. So if they use the word overwhelming at the beginning of the simultaneous, in the middle, and at the end, and they think it's such an important word, so they decide to mark it as a scoring unit, you're going to miss, it's going to be -3. If they use it only 1, it's -1. Okay, sometimes they do that, but it's well known that this type of practice doesn't happen too often. You may find maybe a couple of times where the word is repeated twice, and in both instances is within those scoring units. Yeah. So let's do this practice now. We're going to do a long practice. It's going to be simultaneous. I'm going to be monitoring you. I'm going to send you all the link as I did last week. I was able to get it last week by 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, I think, but wait for it tomorrow, the day after tomorrow. I don't know how long when we're going to get this links, okay? But I'll send them to you as soon as possible. Most likely, when after I finish here at 5 o'clock, I have dinner. Around 8 o'clock, I go to home, and in my home office, I most likely will go to my home office, and that's when I try to actually send everything that is pending to all of you. Hopefully, if your link came in by that time, then I'll do that. And then the next time that I'll check is on Sunday morning. And then if so, it could be on Sunday morning. If not, Sunday night. If not, it will be Monday. But I doubt, because I already got the links for the previous class. So this is working very, very well. All right, so the practice is going to begin in approximately 40 seconds or so. Again, I know you have to allow me you have to agree that I monitor you. There is a button that you have to click, so you will know it's me monitoring. But you may not know when I leave, okay? So if that makes you nervous, good, that's even better, because we want to work with that anxiety level, okay? Relax, relax. Okay, having said that, let's do the simultaneous. We're doing simultaneous now, so let's do simultaneous practices. It's going to begin in approximately 40 seconds, 40 seconds. Thank you.